as much as we can, all the questions and answers to what's out there. So let's begin. Testing. I mentioned this in the email, but just kind of to recap and give it a bit more detail. Right now, the guidelines are calling for all campers and staff to have 2 tests. One, a PCR test that is taken 3 days prior to coming to camp. So you would take the test in your hometown, and there might be some options for you if you need that. I'll talk about that in a second, but you have the test taken, and then you come to camp showing a negative PCR result. That's for all campers, all staff. Again, that is the guideline as we know it now. The first day of camp, on arrival day, the guidelines are calling for a rapid test to be done. Again, all campers and staff to be given a rapid test. Why a rapid test? A rapid test, you can get the results in 15 minutes. Now, if we were going to do a PCR test on the day of, if those of you who've been tested know this, but typically the results take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. So we were going to have to wait for those results. We would have to quarantine everybody before we got the results back. So that's why the guidelines at the moment are calling for a rapid test. We get the results in 15 minutes. Now, there is a downside to the rapid test. They're not quite as accurate as the PCR test. So that does happen that false positives come up. Right now, if someone tests positive, assuming the negative PCR is fine, when you arrive at camp, if someone tests positive, you cannot have them come into camp unless they can get a negative PCR test. So you have the options. So that means you will, now I hope it doesn't happen. The last thing we want is anyone to show up at camp and not be able to come into camp. But you'd have to get a negative PCR test before you'd be allowed to come into camp. I am in conversations with many medical companies how we're going to provide the testing. The hope also is that by the time camp starts, I know a lot of the testing now, some companies can say they can provide results in 12 hours. If you do get a positive test, you have the option. You can, again, go back home, get a negative test, come to camp. A lot of you ask questions about refunds. If you test positive and you opt not to come to camp, then you would get a full refund for camp. It's the same policy. The COVID policy around this is the same as our medical policy. If your child was at camp and they got sick, nothing to do with COVID, they got sick and they couldn't stay at camp, whether it was 1 day in or 5 days in, you would get refunded for, we prorate it for the amount that they would miss camp. So this is no different than that. So you would be certainly eligible for a refund. One of the questions I received a couple times was if a camper has tested positive previously, is once someone has had COVID for, I don't know the exact time frame, but between 3 and 6 months, where they could still test positive even though they don't have the virus anymore in their system. So the policy we have taken with our staff at the YMCA, we had a couple staff that tested positive, and they kept going back to get tested, and they kept coming back positive even though they weren't. If that's the situation, if your child has tested positive in the past 6 months, then you can provide us with a form from a doctor that says, look, they are COVID free, then they'll be allowed to join us in camp. So, if someone is symptomatic during the session, so everyone's in camp, we've gotten all the negative tests, camp is on. If someone, camp or staff becomes symptomatic during the session, we will test them. We'll certainly quarantine them for that time away from everyone. We'll get them a test. Whether or not they are symptomatic, we will leave that decision up to our healthcare providers. We have nurses on site, but we also have local doctors that we deal with all summer. Those of you that have thought you were symptomatic, as you know, a couple months ago, I had a cough and a sore throat, and I thought maybe I had it, and I went to the doctor, I got tested, I didn't have it. By the way, I have been vaccinated. But that is something our healthcare provider will dictate if we need to get the camper or staff tested. going to talk about quarantines, but let's pause there. Any questions in the chat room I need to address on the testing?
Not at this moment.
Yeah, not at this moment.
Okay.
Oh, wait, one moment. Sorry, a few just came in. So the first one says, will our nurse call the family as soon as the child is being tested or is symptomatic?
Yes. Yes. Any time. Sorry, let me just expand on that.
Yep,
So again,
sorry.
Sorry. So the policies in general at camp around the health center is if your child goes to the health center, not for, for a bump or scrape, but if they go there and they either have to see a doctor, we have to take them off site, or they have to stay overnight, or if there's any the slightest of concern, the nurses will contact you. In this case with COVID, if your child goes and we think they're symptomatic, or certainly if they're going to get tested, you will be contacted right away.
Mhm. The next question is about allergies. So obviously some symptoms of allergies might look like symptoms of COVID. What are we going to do about that? I guess that's what the question is asking.
Again, we're going to have to leave that to the healthcare provider to determine should this person, camper, or staff get tested.
Mhm. The next question is, will all staff members be fully vaccinated?
I'm going to talk about vaccines in a second, but let me move on to quarantines. So the current guidelines right now call for all campers and staff, they are encouraged to quarantine as much as possible leading up to camp. You are not required to, and it's purely an honor system. We have no way of making sure that happens, but that is the recommendation right now. During the session, if a camper staff is symptomatic or for whatever reason, we are told that someone has to be quarantined. Our policy is that person, camper or staff, will go home. And this also, by the way, is a pre-COVID policy. The reason being that if someone really has to be quarantined and is going to spend 24 hours or 48 hours in the health center, they're much better served, especially if it's a camper, to be home with their family. So know that, and this is the same for our out-of-state families, or we may have potentially, it's not sure yet, have some out-of-country campers, but if you need to quarantine your child, we are going to ask you to make plans to come pick your child up, regardless of where you're from. If you're out of state, maybe you have family here in the state, but that is our policy. We're not quarantining people here. It's not in the best interest of the camper or the staff. I mentioned the refunds. So the vaccines. A great many of you asked the question, are we requiring our staff to be vaccinated? We are not. We actually can't by HIPAA laws. We can encourage our staff to get vaccinated, and that's what we're doing. Same with our YMCA staff. It's not a state guideline. You do not have to be vaccinated to work at a summer camp, resident camp, or day camp. We are encouraging our staff to be vaccinated. I have every belief that all, if not 99% of them, will be vaccinated. But that is where we are with that. So, other questions in there, Sarah, Sean?
Yeah.
There are some questions. Some you will be addressing later on in this discussion. I have two questions pertaining to what you previously talked about with testing, if you don't mind answering those.
I know.
So one is, and they're both kind of related. If you have a negative PCR test, but show a positive rapid without symptoms, and you get sent back home, how soon can you come back if the rapid test you take at home shows negative?
In order to come back, you would have to have a rapid test wouldn't suffice. You would have to have a PCR test, a negative PCR test. So now we are right now in conversations. Again, we're going to have, I haven't determined which one, but we're going to have a medical organization working with us during the summer. And one of the ones I was speaking to today has said to us that we can have families have PCR tests and get the results in 12 hours. So as soon as you have a negative PCR test, you would be allowed to come back into camp.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm not sure if you did say this specifically, but the PCR, you take the PCR test within 3 days of, I'm reading this question wrong. PCR test within 3 days of start of camp.
Yes.
Yes.
And then Bruce, also, parents are asking about how frequently will staff members will get tested, like at the start of every session, then also like in regards to like days off.
Yeah, great. That's perfect timing. So staff will be doing a PCR test and a rapid test, the same as campers at the beginning of camp. Every session, staff will be doing a rapid test. Staff are permitted to have time off this summer. If we didn't allow, well, first of all, we didn't allow staff to have time off, A, be against the law, and B, we would not be able to find any staff. And so staff will be having their time off. We are asking them to, like we do with, just let me back up a sec. For those of you that are concerned, because this came up a lot about staff having time off and what they're going to do, we have our day camp staff that every single day of the summer go home every day and come back to camp. They're not being tested. What they have to do is they have to come back and they have to self-certify. And we have multiple conversations with them about if they feel ill and talking about their symptoms. So staff do not have to be vaccinated. When they come back from time off, they will be given a test, and they are going, and again, self-certifying as well. And if there's any concerns, they will not come back onto the site, and they will be tested at the beginning of each session, same as always.
Bruce, just a couple more real quick. People are asking for the rapid test that happens on day one. At what point in the check-in process will that happen?
That's a great question. I'll address check-in right now. So we do not have the specific schedule yet for check-in, but what we do know is check-in will be staggered. So meaning in past years, you could come anytime between 1 and 3 o'clock, and there was kind of a rolling check-in. What we are looking at doing for this year is making a longer stretch of time, and you'll have a period of time that and again, I don't have that schedule in front of me, and we're still working on that, but you'll have a half an hour or 45-minute period that you can come and check in. The test will happen at the beginning. So you'll arrive at camp, and essentially the very first thing that'll happen is your child will get tested. You'll be there. Some of you asked, I forgot to mention on the testing, we are looking at having saliva testing as opposed to the nasal swabs. But so you'll be there, we'll do the test, and we'll have the results in 10 to 15 minutes by everything I've been told. Get the positive result, and then from there, you will head into camp with your child. As I mentioned in my email, you can go into camp. We're not going to have the parents go into the cabins, but you will be able to go to the cabin and meet your child's counselors. And someone else also asked if we are limiting it to one parent. We're not. You can, both mom and dad or mom and mom can be there, and that's all good. So that's check-in. More. I apologize. We don't have the specific schedule, but that's our best guess right now. But the testing will be the first thing that happens.
Can I just give a suggestion for those asking questions? These have been great questions, great follow-up questions. It might be a good idea for those asking questions, because a lot of what we are going to talk about, the questions have been asked in the chat, which is great. But if you could just ask the questions once Bruce is done talking related to the topic he's talking about, that would be great for us to kind of keep the flow of conversation along with the questions you guys are asking, which again are all awesome.
So just so you know, some of the other categories I'm going to talk about masks, I'm going to talk about cabin and cabin living, dining hall and meals, cleaning. We just talked about check-in. I'm going to talk about changeover and different activities. So if you have some of those in your mind, you can hold off for those. Any other questions about testing right now?
Yes, Bruce, people are asking for, in consideration for the PCR test that happens that you would get before you arrive to camp, is has to be 3 days, no later than 3 days before you arrive. Is Sunday considered day 3 of that? Like,
Yes.
just to be
Yes.
crystal clear with that. So.
Yeah, so you would look to have your child be tested on Thursday. It doesn't mean that if you're coming to check in at 2 p.m. that you have to wait till 2 p.m. on Thursday, exactly 72 hours, but it's a 3-day window. So sometime on Thursday, if check-in, you should arrange to have a test done.
Yeah, and then also we're asking what happens to kids with religious exemptions in regards to testing before.
Yeah, I just saw that question today. I do not have an answer on that right now. For those who are asking that, I have not seen that be an exception in the guidelines. And so that is something I would have to reach out to the Board of Health. So, and there are going to be other questions that come up. I guess I'm not going to have an answer for you at this moment, but I will circle back with that, but I don't have an answer on that.
Mm-hmm.
We're also getting a lot of questions about our staff in terms of testing them. Is that something that we will be discussing as well, or something you want to address at this moment?
Well, I guess I would look for elaboration on that. Staff will be tested. Same, they have to do a PCR test 3 days before. They'll be tested the day of, and they'll be tested, as I mentioned a moment ago, tested as they come back from time off and the beginning of every session. So, and same with campers, if symptoms arise that we think the staff may have a concern, they'll be tested there, but I'm not sure if there are more questions on the staff testing, but let me also mention while you're looking that up. As I mentioned a few moments ago, I'm in conversation with a lot of medical companies. And, you know, one of the things I'm hoping to be able to provide to families is, I'm guessing most of you would choose, like I've done, to go to, or my kids have done, to go to CVS if I want to get a test and it's covered by insurance. But there are potentially some options to provide the PCR tests for you at home. I don't have that information right now in front of me, but that is something that I will be able to provide to you. Also know that for the day of testing, when you arrive at camp, the rapid test, there'll probably be a small fee that we will need to pass on to parents. You know, the best I'm looking at right now is to get the test. It's going to cost us between $25 and $50 a person. And with 2,000 people on site this summer, that's going to cost us upwards of $100,000. So it is something that we may look at asking you to help us out a little bit with that as one of the fees. So.
Bruce, another testing question, and I guess this would go for staff and children. If somebody has already been vaccinated, do they still need to do the PCR test, or in general, just the testing in general?
Yes, thank you for that. I forgot to mention on vaccines. The guidelines make, at the moment, they make no exceptions for vaccines. So if you are, even if our staff, and again, I'm vaccinated, Sean and Sarah, Rebecca are vaccinated, even the fact that we are vaccinated, our staff will be vaccinated, we still have to do PCR tests 3 days before and the rapid test the day of. So I know in the next month, they're saying they're going to make the vaccine available for 12 to 16-year-olds. So even if your child comes to camp and they are fully vaccinated, at the moment, this may change, the state is not making exceptions for vaccinated people. The tests still have to be done.
And then, Bruce, with testing, and we kind of covered this a little bit with positive cases, parents are wondering is like, what would happen if during the middle of a session, if a camper tests positive, what would happen to the rest of the cabin? Like, what would be the process for the rest of the cabin? And would those parents be notified as well?
Yes, great question. If a camper tests positive, that camper will be sent home. The rest of the cabin will be put into, you know, a mini quarantine and get that cabin group tested right away. No, and yes, the parents would be notified immediately.
All right.
Another question going off of exposure and everything like that. What happens if a staff member tests positive? Do the campers in close contact get tested?
If a camper tests positive that has been in, I'll talk about cohorts in a moment, but yes, if a staff tests positive and they've been in close contact, or certainly if it's the counselor, then yes, that cabin group will get tested. Same procedure as I just mentioned if a camper tested positive.
And just to clarify for people, when Bruce was talking about our day camp staff, that was in reference to the other day camps that the South Shore Y runs. All of our staff that work at Camp Burgess and Hayward live and work on site, just to clarify.
Yes. Thank you, Sean.
Yep. Bruce,
right,
I think
let
you
me
can
mo-
go into your, yeah.
Yeah, I
go
think
ahead.
it's that we can move on to the next
All right,
topic.
let's move on to masks. So right now, you guys are familiar with the term cohort. Cohort is a group size. The resident camps are allowed to have cohorts of 12. Within a cohort, so that would be the cabin group and the counselors, even though the counselors don't even count as part of the cohort. So what the guidelines call for is when you are within your cohort, you do not have to wear masks. So anytime that a cabin group is together, and for those of you who have had kids at camp before, know that's for a fair bit of the day. That the cabin, it's just the cabin group. You do not have to wear masks. When a cabin group is within 6 feet of other cabin groups, and I'll talk about dining hall in a bit, masks are supposed to be worn. I do expect that 6 foot distance to drop to 3 feet, if not at all. But right now in the schools, that's the distancing thing. Right now, the guidelines still say 6 feet, but I expect that to drop. I expect, so again, those of you who have been at camp before know that the afternoon and evening is pretty much cabin activities. And we also know that when kids are eating in the dining hall, they don't have to wear the masks. Anytime they're at the waterfront, they don't have to wear masks. So I do believe that, and I'll talk about the schedule in a bit and how we're going to change around the morning schedule, but I do believe that for the majority of the day, your campers will not have to be in masks. That said, some of you expressed concern saying, look, if your staff are vaccinated or if everyone is coming up with the negative tests, why do they have to wear masks at all? We have to follow the guidelines as much as we may not like masks, and none of us do. You know, if the guidelines call for whatever they call for, 3 feet of distance between cohorts when summer starts, we have to do our best to adhere to that. We can't simply say, well, you don't want a mask, you don't have to wear one. So I will tell you that this cohort exemption around masks is exclusive to resident camps. So if you have a child that goes to our day or any day camp, you know, even though the cohort size is larger, you're allowed to have a group of 25. The kids have to wear their masks all the time within their cohorts. The only time they can't wear their masks is when they are 6 feet apart from everybody. So this is an exception for resident camps. But that's that is the mask guideline at the moment. We will send information about, you are expected to send your child with masks. We'll send information with the packing lists about the best kind of masks. What I'm reading and hearing is it should be not the disposable ones. We are going to have many masks all around camp. If a camper forgets, doesn't, or has dirty theirs, or something has happened, we're going to have masks all over. So that's not a concern, but that is something that you're going to be expected to send along with your camper.
Bruce, just a couple of questions into what you've just last said. The cohort size is 12, but what is the size of an average cabin?
Average cabin is 10. In each cabin, we have 8 campers and 2 counselors. So that's the average size. That's pretty much the size. So.
Yep. And then just with that, and it's off of mask wearing, but a couple of people have chimed in after we moved off of testing, but for staff that are leaving and then coming back after time off, symptoms or like positive test results wouldn't be accurate until 3 to 5 days after testing or after exposure. So would they be getting tested a couple days after they arrive too?
Right now, I mean, you could say the same thing about everyone at camp, not just the staff. You know, the campers that arrive, if they do a rapid test and it's negative, they still could show symptoms 3 to 5 days afterwards. So right now, the guidelines are not calling for in between session tests or during session tests. It's not something that we would rule out. And certainly, as soon as we think someone is symptomatic, we would test them. But I don't know that this is exclusive to staff. It's an ongoing discussion. Is it, you know, there were some camps last year. There are different guidelines around the country. And there are some states that call for testing for camps to be partway through the session, which again is not a bad thing. The challenge with that is if it's, whether it's a rapid test or if it's a PCR test, they have to be quarantined for a while. Because I was asked the question, why not have all of the campers, if the PCR test is more accurate, why not do that the day of camp instead of the rapid test? If we do that, then we have to quarantine everybody until we get the results, which could be as long as 24 hours.
Yep.
So until the guidelines say otherwise, the plan right now is not to just simply test the staff mid-session, but that's not something we're ruling out either.
Yeah. I can answer these comments that people have been asking. Open house dates, we said at the beginning, but we're having 2 open house dates, May 16th and May 23rd, from noon to 4. Just come right up to Camp Burgess, 75 Stowe Road. It's also on our website, and we'll be doing tours of both camps. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I also just wanted to say there's been some questions about this being written up for after the meeting, and we are planning on sending out notes from this meeting in the days following.
And I believe I mentioned at the beginning, we are recording the session as well.
Yes, yeah. Along with that.
I mentioned that the cohort is the cabin. So anytime your child is with their cabin, they do not have to wear masks, including eating, swimming. For those of you who are new to camp, our program is based on the cabin. Pre-COVID, I believe the strength of our program is how much we encourage and have cabin activities. There are a lot of camps out there that the majority of the programs they do in the day are large group activities, which are fine, but I believe the strength of camp is the activities and the bonding that happens with the cabin. It's always been our focus, and with COVID and restrictions, even more so this year. One of you asked, and it's a legitimate concern that, with all of the COVID we've had this year and the challenge that kids have in making social connections, what might we doing differently this year to help enhance that? Again, this has just been our focus. I mean, even in pre-COVID years, just the simple fact of the amount of time they spend with the cabin group, that's where the social connections happen. It's really the strength of the camp. A couple of you asked around, specific to the cabins, asked around beds and bunks. Right now, so within the cohort, within the cabin, they don't have to wear masks. The guidelines say we encourage kids to sleep 6 feet apart. Most of our cabins are set up that way. And in the bunks where they're, foot to foot, exactly that, their feet might be close to each other, but their heads are 6 feet apart. So you'll see when you come to camp that there is a 6 foot distance, but that was the only kind of mention in the guidelines about beds. I'm going to move on to the next thing, and you guys, Sean, Sarah, Rebecca, you guys interrupt me if something pressing comes up you want me to address. I want to talk about dining hall and meals, because this rightfully, understandably came up in a lot of questions. The one thing that we are assuming right now, given the guidelines, is we will not be able to feed the entire camp in the dining hall at one time, unless somehow the guideline, when Hayward is full, between campers and staff, there are 400 females in the dining hall. Burgess, it's about 300. And we know that the guidelines don't allow for that number to socially distance. So we have 2 options in our dining hall. One is to feed everyone at one time, but just not simply use the whole dining hall, to use other spaces. And I'll talk about that in a second. And the other option is to have staggered meals, is to feed. I'm fairly certain, and we're still looking at this, that we could, within the social distancing guidelines, we can have, for instance, at Hayward, 200, half the camp in there at one time, and still have the cabins and the tables 6 feet apart. So again, option B is to have staggered meals where, the juniors in camp, come in and they have a meal for whatever, half an hour, 45 minutes, and then the seniors come in. The challenge with the staggered meals is the scheduling and the rest hours and the different program areas and the specialists. So we certainly will make that work if that's the best option. Ideally, we would still like to try to feed everyone at one time. So we haven't made a determination yet, and certainly we'll let you know that. At Burgess, that's a little bit easier because you have the big main room of dining and you have 2 separate meeting rooms. And there's enough space, even though they're not all in one room, there is enough space at Burgess, I believe, that we could have the entire camp eat at one time. At Hayward, it's a bit more challenging. We talked to some camps and we talked about the possibility of putting a big tent outside. That's great. It doesn't work for inclement weather. It also, takes up a program space where our tennis and basketball courts are. We're looking at the option of using the old dining hall, which is about a 10-second walk from the new dining hall, and kind of doing that on a rotation basis where the kids eat in there. But we are still looking at different options. Wherever the kids eat, the tables will be 6 feet apart. The social distancing will be in place. When campers and staff are eating, they're allowed to be without their masks. When they get up if they get up to go somewhere, when they're coming in the dining hall, then masks have to be worn. For those of you who are new to camp, in pre-COVID summers, when the meals we serve at camp are called family style. So meaning when the cook makes lasagna, we have a tray of lasagna for the table. Typically one of the campers or the staff will go up, get the tray of food, bring it back to the table. Everyone will serve themselves. And each day it's a different camper that'll be the hopper. They're the ones that, or 2 campers, they'll go up and get the food, bring it back, clear the table afterwards. Right now, at this moment, the guidelines are calling against family style meals in the manner that I've described. So 2 things we are looking at, and that still may change, is one is to, and I have to get, the okay from this on the Board of Health, is to do the family style meals, but all the serving, all the going up to get the food, all the serving at the table, is done by the staff. So that the campers don't touch the utensils, the staff gets the food, brings it back, serves everyone, and does everything that needs to be done in the dining hall. The other option we are looking at is doing buffet style meals with the staff behind the different food areas and serving the campers as they come by. That's a good, sounds like a simple option. One of the challenges with that is the amount of time it takes the entire camp to go through the buffet line. So that's our thoughts right now in dining. Again, guidelines might change. Let me pause there to see if there are questions.
Yes, Bruce, so will they be eating in their cohorts?
Yes, they'll be eating with their cabins, absolutely, which they do pre-COVID, they do anyway. That's each table at camp is its own cabin. That's always been the case.
Yeah, and then dietary restrictions, like if somebody is vegan, vegetarian, plant-based diet.
Yeah, yes, we've always done that. Nothing to do with COVID. We provide vegetarian meals, we provide vegan meals, we provide gluten-free meals. Pretty much any food challenge that you can come up with, we have dealt with it. And so
I just have 2 other comments and questions. One is about singing in the dining halls, and the other, there are several questions about adventure camp pertaining to food. If you want to answer those now or at the end in regards to other questions about adventure camp.
Yeah, I'll let Rebecca answer the adventure ones more towards the end. Singing, we haven't talked about. My thought right now is once the meal is over, we will bring all the campers. Singing, for those of you who are new to camp, is a huge part of our dining hall experience. And to so much so that we had to put a clock up in the dining hall at Burgess, and we had to insist that they had to wait 20 minutes into the meal before they started singing, because they would start singing 30 seconds into the meal. So the thought right now, the guidelines stay as they are, is that we will bring the entire camp outside on the field and do the singing outside at the end of the meal.
And then Bruce, is there any difference between what we're describing now for normal camp and then co-ed week?
No difference. The only, I would say it's for those of you, co-ed week is the last week of the summer. It's a 1-week program that we do at Hayward. And as the name implies, it's boys and girls. If there's going to be any difference, it's going to be because the restrictions have eased up so much. But at this point right now, there is no difference.
We've also had a few questions about the ventilation in the dining hall. So what will we do to ensure this? Will windows be open, et cetera?
Yeah, for those of you who have not been to our dining halls are all windows on all the way around on both sides, and at both dining halls, we have built them in such a way that up top, I think it's called, I can't remember the name, but it's a cupola or whatever, but there are windows that we can open up top that let the air go through. Yes, so the dining halls, unless of course it's pouring rain, the dining halls will be heavily ventilated at all times. The cabins also, for those of you who are new to camp, there are lots of screens and windows in all the cabins. So.
Mhm.
Also, just a comment, in terms of the singing, if you are new too, we sing a lot of songs pertaining to our camp, along with some pop culture songs. It's a little bit of everything that we do when we talk about singing at camp.
Mhm. Yes. I
Good.
believe those are all the questions, yeah, about dining right
Great.
now. And again, we're sorry if we missed one, but we do have a going list of questions that you guys are asking, and like we'll bring those up as we cover those subjects.
And
Just so that
again,
you all know.
sorry, and again, along with this being recorded, we will be sending out notes. So look for the questions that you have asked in this chat that might not be necessarily addressed in the notes that we will send out.
Thank you, guys. And I'm sorry we have to do it this way. Having to do a Zoom call and doing a monologue is challenging. I would love to be able to hear your voices and questions out loud. So cleaning. As I mentioned in my email to you all, we are going to have a more thorough cleaning schedule that's going to involve all of the staff. Right now, the guidelines are calling for the cleaning of, a more bathrooms and showers twice a day, which in fact is already what we do. As much as we would love the idea of having someone, stand in the bathrooms and every time someone comes in and uses them, do a cleaning afterwards, it's just not practical or possible. I do know from my research that it is more difficult to transmit COVID through hard surfaces. And the key, which we will be talking about all summer with campers and staff, is hand washing. So yes, the bathrooms and showers will be cleaned much more thoroughly. Our plan is to involve all the staff. Typically, we only have 3 or 4 maintenance staff, cleaning staff at each camp during the summer, and they do go in the bathrooms and showers and clean them a couple times a day, as well as other areas of camp. In order to do all the deeper cleaning that we want to do, and the staff know this as we're hiring them, it's going to involve all. Even though we've always done a cleaning of the cabins in between sessions, that'll be much more thorough. But that's pretty much the plan, but it's really, really to key on, and we're going to have hand sanitizers already do all around camp, but it's to key on the hand washing. We are going to as well have staggered times for the bathrooms. So in a typical summer, if you go into the girls' bathroom at 9 o'clock at night, there's 30 girls in there trying to brush their teeth or get ready for bed. And so we're going to have to stagger the times with cabins, both for showers and teeth brushing as well.
And then also someone just asked like where the bathroom's located.
Every bathhouse in camp is, I would say, no more than a 30-second walk from any cabin. No, and again, if that's a new person who's asking that, I encourage you to come to camp on open house and see that. But yeah, no, there's no cabin that is a far walk away to any bathhouse. So I already, and again, if something comes up, just Sean, Sarah, Rebecca, just let me know.
Yeah.
I already talked about check-in, changeover. So some of you, in fact, a great many campers this summer are staying for 4 weeks. Typically for campers, the way we're working changeover this year is the way we work it every year. Campers are welcome to stay. When they do stay, we do a laundry service. Campers are also welcome to be picked up and go home. They will have to do a test, just like the staff coming back from time off. And like the staff, we're encouraging, if someone is going home, it's going to be be mindful that you're coming back in 2 days, and we're trying to keep everybody safe, but you do not have to stay at changeover as as a, you know, a 4-week or 6-week camper. If your child is staying and you would like to come and visit them, you're also welcome to do that. You know, we'll do the social distancing and the masks. You don't have to do a test. Typically, there's only about 15 or 20 kids that stay in between sessions each summer. So that's changeover. So as I said earlier, I want to talk a little bit about activities. The focus, as always with us, is cabin groups and cabin group activities. Typically in the afternoons and evenings in a regular summer day, those activities are done with the cabin group. And of course, we have all camp activities and unit activities. We do not want to do away with the larger activities, and we don't believe that we have to. I believe that we can find a place which we can where we're going to be able to feed half of the dining hall at one time. We can do a similar thing safely with other of the large activities, for instance, like the opening campfire. Now, at this point, with the current guidelines, we know we can't have 400 girls at the opening campfire there at one time, but I do believe we could probably have half or a third of the camp, and there'll be campfires on different nights. As fun as ever with the you know, all that comes with the campfire, but our plan is not to do away with the large group activities. It's certainly to honor the guidelines and the distancing, but there are too many large activities. For those of you who've been in session 4, like M&P, that are integral part of camp that both campers and staff love. So I do believe that we'll be able to do them. Another example is beach party. Right now, in a regular summer, we have a 1-hour beach party in the afternoon where the entire camp comes down. We're not going to do that this year. We're going to have staggered beach parties for half of the afternoon or for a stretch of it. Half of the camp will be there. You know, some of the kids will be swimming, some will have the boating activities. The other half of the camp will be doing land-based activities. Then we'll switch that. The only difference that we are seeing right now in terms of the daily schedule is interest groups. Now, interest groups, for those of you who are new to camp, interest groups is our two 1-hour morning activities. In typical years, your child would sign up for an activity they have an interest in, hence the name. Canoeing, sailing, arts and crafts, drama, outdoor pursuits, land sports. There's about 15 different activities, and they would sign up as an individual, and for 2 hours each morning, they would do those activities, and they would be doing those with other campers who have signed up for those, but they sign up as an individual. And so it's a mix of groups that would typically be at those interest groups. Given the guidelines, we can't do that for this year. So our plan right now is to still have interest groups, but not where your child goes individually and takes the activity for 5 days, but rather they do it as a cabin. Instead of for 5 days, they do it for a couple days. And again, we're still working on the schedule, but they would have a couple days of sailing, and then a couple days of arts and crafts, or, you know, try to schedule it to fit the desires of that cabin group. And as always, the afternoon, evening is I'll still get a chance to try all the different activities at camp. So this way we'll be able to comply with the guidelines. The other benefit to this, we don't get a lot of complaints at camp. One of the ones I do get over the years is with regards to interest groups, there's only so many campers we can take in each interest group. So we may have, again, 250 girls at Hayward. On any given period in interest group morning, we can only take 20 girls. And so in the course of 2 weeks, we can take 40 girls. So I can't tell you how many times over the years a parent has said to me, oh, my daughter's been going to camp for 3 years. She's never gotten sailing as an interest group. And I get that frustration. So hopefully doing it this way, more kids will get a chance to experience all the different activities at camp. And again, we'll still be able to comply with the guidelines. If there's one activity that will look different this year, sadly, it's our farm. We do still have the goats and the sheep because when we hit COVID last year, we had to lay off a bunch of our staff. And one of the ones we laid off was our farm director. And so we have not had the staff to be able to do the typical planting and farm work that we would do leading up to the summer. So We will not have a big produce garden this summer or any produce garden. So the farm program will look a little bit different. We are going to have a seasonal farm director. Again, there is going to be an opportunity as always for the kids to come and see the animals, take the goats out to for a walk so they can eat the poison ivy, but we just don't have the farm that we had in past years. But other than that, I think the activities are, and Sean and Sarah, Rebecca, you guys speak up, but I anticipate they will be with the social distancing, but they'll be the same fun as always.
Mhm. Yes, and a couple of questions that we've gotten related to that, or just comments. Someone who was asking about like wearing masks on the waterfront, and how Bruce mentioned earlier, like when you're in the water doing like a boating like activity, you wouldn't have to be wearing your mask. And the whole
Correct.
idea behind expanding this, like, or spreading out the schedule to limit the amount of people in one area at a time, is so that we can feel comfortable with, like, when you're on the beach, you don't have to be wearing a mask because you just be around your cohort. Just to clarify on that.
Really. And real quick, just to chime in on adventure trips in terms of, basically everything that's been covered so far does apply in terms of, the cabin group. That's the same at adventure trips. It's your activity group. And, that's always been our setup, is that group does everything together. So in terms of, activities for those who've attended in previous years or aren't sure about this year, adventure trips is all outside, and that's always been what we've done. And so that's kind of the beauty, is that we're taking kids on all these different outdoor activities, out exploring, and we're surfing and all of this, but we're doing it all outside. And so that means that thankfully we're not very limited, and really not a whole lot needs to change in that regard.
Bruce, are you going to be talking about the big programming activities like ALA and M&P as well?
I wasn't planning to.
Okay, we just had a question asking about like all camp activities that happen typically, like that happen in session 4, like will those be happening?
That our plan is to have all of the activities that we've always had at camp. So we haven't talked specifically about M&P or ALA, and I know those letters mean nothing to a lot of you, but our plan is to be able to run those, and I believe especially being towards the latter part of the summer, the restrictions will be even eased. But yes, absolutely, we plan on doing all of our large group activities. One of the things that we do every year is a dance, and for both camps. Now we're not going to be able to do that, but the hope is we can still have an evening where it's a smaller unit, but they get together, we have music, and the kids are distanced, but time to interact with each other. So.
And something going off of that too, that, how we were talking about interest groups and cabin activities and things like that, like, although a lot of these things might look a little different than in summers past, they're not going to feel different. We're also excited to be here along with your campers, and that's what really counts and what contributes to the experience that is being had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There are other questions specific to anything I've said so far?
Yes, there's one that I think we just need to clarify on. So when we were talking about beach party, where it might be like half the camp at the waterfront, and then with like my comment of like being spread out so that you don't have to be wearing masks. With that, our plan right now is that if we have half the camp down at the waterfront, within that half, we'd be spreading that half throughout our whole waterfront. That doesn't just include the swimming area and the beaches, but also like all of our boating activities and like our water trampolines and activities like that. So like half the camp is truly spread out through just the waterfront in general, so that like if you are swimming, you're one of the few cabins that's only doing swimming and like being socially distanced from any other cabins, just to clarify. I don't believe there's any other questions about activities per se, unless I'm missing one.
Well, there's the question, so all activities are cabin all the time, no choice or opportunity to be with other kids. So you will have opportunities to be with other cabins. It'll just be, in terms of following the COVID guidelines that we have in place in terms of mask wearing and being socially distant with those cabins that are not obviously in your cohort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Bruce.
Oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I just saying that I didn't think that there's no other questions involving like activities per se.
Are there any other COVID related questions?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. So if someone was to stay for changeover, would they then get another rapid test at the beginning of the next following session?
No.
No.
If they stay at camp, if they don't leave camp, no, they don't have to get another rapid test.
And then will we be having international staff and or campers? And if there's a travel ban at the time that campers session comes up, will there be a refund?
Yes.
Because they wouldn't be able to get into the country.
Yeah, same, yeah, absolutely. Our plan, so right now we do have some international campers that are planning to come to camp. I think one of you, or a couple of you asked about, are there guidelines around out of state or out of country campers? There are not at the moment. They will follow the same guidelines as everyone else. We are actually hoping to get international staff. They will follow the same guidelines. You know, we rely on getting international staff to help in the kitchen and maintenance and other areas of camp. So we are endeavoring to get international staff.
Mm-hmm. And then with this staggered check-in process, will people that put certain either top or bottom bunk requests still be able to have their preference? Yeah,
I mean, I can't. Yes, short answer is yes. I can't specifically say that there are 8 campers in the cabin. I doubt that all 8, you know, there's always 4 and 4 that want top and bottom. So, but I think for the most part, and campers get their requests. I can't say it happens 100% of the time, but they can absolutely put in their requests.
Mm-hmm. And then with changeover again, if because usually in the past, everybody that's staying for changeover is brought together. Will campers be isolated? Will there be heavy mask or social distancing with people from different cabins or different camps coming together for changeover?
Yeah, I think it depends on how many kids are. We're not going to have kids in the cabins by themselves. We'll probably put a few kids together. Again, if they're staying at camp and everyone's been negative, then, you know, that would be the cohort for that time. So.
Mm-hmm. So over with activities, there's a question about if, sorry, so like if a cabin, what's the difference between like a cabin activity that, so I think the question is asking if there's a difference between a cabin activity compared to an interest group because we are making this change. I would say the answer is no to that. Like the interest group is still going to be that we have specialized staff that are trained in teaching, like whether it's sailing, canoeing, kayaking, and they're still going to get that experience of the activity. It's just going to be within your cabin. And then continuing with that question, there will be times when your child's cabin will be able to interact with other cabins. It's just that is going to be where mask wearing and social distancing come into play because there's 2 cohorts interacting with each other. Anybody, Sarah or Rebecca, if you see any other questions, I'm just trying to get caught up.
I see the question at the bottom and related to COVID, obviously. If a cabin counselor gets sick, do you have extra counselors that can sub in? Yes, we do. Our junior counselor program, we have, through the junior counselor program, JCs can float. So they kind of stay in one unit per session and they help out in the cabins when needed. So for instance, if a cabin counselor does get sick in a cabin, that junior counselor that is floating in that unit would step in.
Mm-hmm. And a question back to changeover. Bruce, if you could help answer this one. If my son is staying between session 3 and 4 and I want to take him out of camp Friday and return him Sunday, if I'm staying locally with myself and partner who are both vaccinated, will he still need to be tested?
If someone's being taken out of camp and they're coming back,
changeover, yeah.
If they're leaving camp, again, right now by the guidelines, then yes, we would have to give them a rapid test when they come back. It's like they're checking into camp for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And then also, so parents can walk up to the cabins, but they cannot go into the cabins and help set up.
That's our best guess right now. I think it would make, and I appreciate, again, my daughters went to camp. I appreciate for you new parents or you veterans as well. You want to go in and help them get settled. I think given the circumstances and the challenge between timing that as well, it's not something we're going to completely rule out. And, you know, maybe we'll make an exception if you're a new family or parent or a camper, but at the moment, that's our best thought.
And just on top of that, with first-year parents, because this is a commonly asked question, as a first-year parent or your camper's a first-year camper, you'll be getting a phone call within the first 48 hours of your kid being dropped off at camp from your camper's unit leader, who's like in charge of their age group, just updating you on how they're doing, what activities they're doing, and how they're adjusting to it. And that's something that we do for all first-year campers. A question with when are bunk requests due? If you didn't put a bunk request or a cabin mate request on your initial sign-up form when you signed your child up for camp, you can just reach out to the office or to anybody here at camp, and we can help you fill in that request. For sure.
So what I'd like to suggest, so I know that on that last question, I know that many of you are new and you have non-COVID questions that came up. You have questions about cell phones and bunkmates, and I'm happy to stay on the line with everyone. So if let's give it like a few minutes. If I'd like to see if anyone has any more COVID specific questions, well, you know, and then we will pause, and then, you know, if whoever wants to stay, we'll kind of move on to anything and everything you want to ask. And if there's 3 of you on the line, great. If there's 100 of you on the line, great. We'll answer whatever questions you want. And again, I would encourage you to come to the open house. Even if we answer your questions, I would encourage you to come to the open house and see the camps and meet the staff.
Bruce, I just have
Go ahead.
one question pertaining to COVID is, if a kid comes back positive, will they be refunded?
Yeah, I thought I had addressed that at the beginning, but yes, if you are test positive, if for some reason you cannot attend camp for a medical reason, COVID or not, then so if you come to camp and you test positive, if you test positive 3 days before you can't come to camp, you will be refunded. If you are in camp for 3 days and you test positive and you have to leave, you will be refunded minus those 3 days. So yes.
Another question is, if a family has one camper at Burgess and one camper at Hayward, how will those times be coordinated? I know in the past that's also been a thing. I don't see that being different this year, but if you care to elaborate.
I don't have an, we haven't figured out the check-in staggered times yet. We'll look at that, and we will, for those of you who with kids at both camps, we will accommodate and make that work. So.
Also, this is a great time. Somebody just asked about adventure trips related COVID questions. Please feel free to like say those in the chat as well. Somebody just asked about disinfecting of like equipment, harnesses, helmets, stuff like that. Yeah, any shared equipment that that would be used during a normal day will be disinfected and sanitized in between usage. And then also like we're putting a heavy focus on people sanitizing with hand sanitizer before and after like use of like after an activity or like using equipment as well.
We just got a question here about dining procedures at adventure trips. So meals are a little bit different at adventure trips. As I said, we do everything outside, and that includes meals. So the meals are, you know, the kids are kind of a little bit more a part of the meal process, and then meals are actually eaten outside. So the adventure trips is in a separate area. If you haven't come before, it's called base camp, and we have kind of our own separate area on the Camp Burgess property. And it's a pretty nice setup. We've got lots of picnic tables. We have a big pavilion area. The campers are all sleeping in what we call platform tents. So, you know, a lot of open air going on at adventure trips, but that includes meals will be eaten with your, you know, your cohort for adventure trips, which is your group, whether you're doing surfing or castaways, whatever that is. Every trip is on a different schedule. So unlike what we've been talking about with our traditional camp at adventure trips, your group will be doing your activities together. You might eat dinner at 5:30, you might eat dinner at 6:30, just depending on the timing of your other activities for the day. And so, you know, meals will be eaten as a group, and we don't need to worry so much about it being a time when people come together indoors, because that's just not the structure for adventure trips.
Mm-hmm.
We have some questions here about payment deadlines and refunds if people are concerned about COVID or still have questions after the end of today?
Hmm.
Yeah, good question. So I was going to kind of wrap up with that on, at least on the COVID piece. The policy call, the regular policy calls for balanced payment to be done by May 1st, which is Saturday. Recognizing that we were only able to have the Zoom call today, and some of you I know are basing your decisions on coming to camp perhaps on the Zoom call. We're going to push that off a week. Hopefully that will give you enough time to decide. You know, and you could ask yourself, well, why not push it off a month or 2 weeks? You know, we have a lot of kids on waiting lists. We have to start ordering supplies. We have to hire staff. You know, if there are specific questions, my belief is that in the next week, if there's something that hasn't been answered that you need an answer for, we can try to find that. But we're going to push off the payment deadline for a week until May 7th.
A couple non-COVID related questions.
Well, let's.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I just want to be for the folks who have been at camp before and like kind of know all the specifics around just the day-to-day stuff. I kind of want to wrap up with the COVID stuff and say thanks to everyone. Anyone who wants to stay on and has any non-COVID. Let's stop there. So as I said, we're not going to stop here. We're going to kind of move on to anything and everything non-COVID, even if it's something that is simple or mundane. So please stay on the line. We'll be on as long as you want. For those of you who are getting off, thank you so much. Thank you for registering your kids for camp, for trusting us. I hope what we have said to you tonight gives you some more peace of mind. I can promise you that camp will be fun this summer and it will be safe. And that's always our goal every year, pre-COVID times, COVID times. And judging by how many kids are at camp, I know this is an important thing. You want to send your kids to camp, kids want to come to camp. So thank you anyway, and you're getting off. Thank you for being on. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions about anything. And yes, let's move on to the other questions. So.
I just have another question, COVID related, but also general camp related. Are the overnights still going to be a thing this summer?
We have not had discussions on overnights. So don't know. I mean, the overnights are usually done within just the cabin group. So it is the cohort. So typically what we have done, if a cabin really doesn't want to go on an overnight, they don't have to. Overnights, for those of you who are new, the cabin goes out and cooks their meal and sleeps out over, in the woods. We're all very close to camp on the camp property, but we haven't had discussions around overnights yet.
Yeah, just some other questions that I'm seeing. One regarding like payment where your credit card changed or anything like that. If you have any questions regarding like method of payment or payments or charges to your camp brand account, please feel free to reach out to us, either a phone call or an email. We're always around. We're always here to talk, and we can like fix any issue or like prevent any issue from coming up. And if we do find an issue where like a credit card is expired or changed for whatever reason, we'll reach out to you as well. If like a lot of you have like set up monthly draws on your accounts, if one of those like dings on our end for any reason, we'll reach out to you guys. No problem at all. It's very simple for us to fix.
A couple of you had emailed during the week to ask about cell phones and how that works. So campers are not allowed to have cell phones at camp. So if a camper arrives with a cell phone, we kind of put it and lock it away in the office for the week or the 2 weeks. So the ways that you can communicate with your kids. So as Sean or Sarah mentioned earlier, we're all first-time parents. Within the first 48 hours of camp, you will get a call. You get a call saying how your child is doing, what activities they're doing. We're not going to have interest groups now, but just kind of giving an overview of how they're managing in the first couple of days. You are welcome at any point during your child's time at camp to call camp. We're not going to have you call and speak to your child. We have one phone line coming in and we have hundreds of kids, but you're welcome at any time to call and speak to your child's counselor, the unit leader, Sean or Sarah, Rebecca, or myself. You're always welcome to do that. We do have a system set up where you can email your camper, and we deliver emails every day. We do not have a setup where they can email you back. So sometimes that's a frustration on parents. They'll send out a daily email saying how much you miss your child. And unless you have really kind of encourage them to write to you, and you don't get anything back. But those are the ways that you can reach out and be in communication with your child. If a couple of you also asked about homesickness, probably the most asked question in my career. I think there is a bit of a myth that many kids get homesick as we imagine they do. Certainly it does happen, but I can tell you of the 2,000 campers that will come to camp this summer, if this summer is any example of past summers, there's usually on the average about 4 or 5 that go home because they're homesick. It is not a common thing. It is common that when a child first come to camp, whether they're 7 or 15, they might be apprehensive or a little bit homesick that first night. That's normal, but that passes. And it's not a negative thing. What we tell the kids, we tell the parents, if your child is homesick, all that means is they have a great home. That passes. And our staff are well trained in how to identify that, how to deal with homesick kids. If it really becomes an issue, it's 24 hours into camp and said child is really just miserable and doesn't want to be there, then we'll call you. But even at that point, likely we will not get you on the phone with your child yet. We'll say your child's really homesick. Here's the stuff that we've done. Do you have any suggestions? The reason that we won't get you on the phone with your child, because 99 times out of 100, once you get on the phone with your child, they're going home. And you may want them to go home, and that's fine. But as soon as they hear mom or dad's voice, then they're not going to stay at camp. And again, and that's fine. It does happen. It happens a handful of times in the summer. Usually happens when something else is happening at home and the child is concerned. Maybe there's a sick relative or something, but it's not a common thing as you might think first coming to camp.
And then on that as well, we are at people are just asking about different methods and approaches to homesickness. I'm assuming this is what the question is asking. What if something is wrong and doesn't want to talk to anyone there in real life? But with that in general, I would say almost 70% of our staff, even a higher number of our counselors, are previous campers before. Like me and Sarah, a lot of our staff members kind of grow through the ranks of being a camper, a CIT, and a junior counselor and a counselor. And then also the counselors have a direct person that's in charge of their age group, their unit leader, who's in charge of kind of all the cabins that are in the same age as you or as your camper. And they're also right there every step of the way with any issues or homesickness issues that come up. So there's a plethora of resource and support whenever an issue like homesickness or anything like that comes up. And we're very well versed and handled and have seen a lot of different situations and have a lot of solutions to any issue that may come up. A couple questions so that I don't miss them beforehand. Somebody was asking about mail. Please feel free to pack envelopes, stamps, writing implements and paper to send letters. The kids have a place where they can just give a letter to the counselor and the counselor will put it in this mailbox, and every day every morning, whatever's in there gets thrown into the mailbox and will get sent out. I can't say how quickly it will get to you. It depends on how fast the mailman gets it there, but definitely feel free to get that out there. In regards to the camp store, we're still having the camp store. We'll still have water bottles, sweatshirts, t-shirts, sweatpants, flashlights, little knickknacks with the Camp Burgess and Hayward logo on it. Every cabin will get a chance to go into the store and buy something. This is with money that you've already put down on their Camp Brain account. If you don't know if you've already done that or not, you can just log in and see it right there. And then also on checkout day, this may look a little different with our checkout approach, but we're still we'll have our store open at checkout for anybody that wants to use up the rest of their balance or buy something else for mom and dad, anything like that. It's completely fine. And then we also have toothbrushes and shampoo and stuff if you might forget the little necessities to get you through camp as well that are available for purchase as well.
Going off of that, I'm just plug our store at the moment. Our store is live online right now. So if you are interested in purchasing anything at this moment, you can go online and do so. But also back to mail. So there's a question a lot earlier about if campers can send emails. Campers cannot send emails, but they can send letters, like Sean said.
Yeah.
And you can send letters and packages to your child. Absolutely.
Yeah.
To add to the store question, I did see a question in the chat at one point about adventure trips with the store. So 2 things there. Absolutely. This doesn't apply to regular Burgess and Hayward, but specifically for adventure trips, if campers want to bring cash, knowing that they will be off-site sometimes, they are able to do that. But that said, this year with COVID, you know, sometimes in previous years, we'd pick a cute little downtown on Cape Cod and let kids explore a little bit and go shopping. And this year, you know, that's just an unnecessary COVID risk to be doing that. So certainly they can bring a little bit of cash. There might be an opportunity to go to an ice cream shop or, you know, something outdoors, but we won't be having lots of opportunities to spend that, you know, while you're out and about. And also for adventure trips, you can set up a camp store deposit to spend in our store here at camp for everything that Sean just mentioned that we sell there. In addition to that, if they bring cash, they can spend that cash here at our camp store. But again, that's only for adventure trips. For anyone attending Burgess or Hayward, only money through your camp store account. And I see a question about that as well in the chat. So for the camp store account, that's something that you can set up online through your Camp Brain account. And usually, you know, it's personal preference if you think your camper is going to want a water bottle or, you know, one of every single thing that we're selling in the store, how much money you want to put in there. But the campers usually only go to the store once, so you don't need to worry about, you know, monitoring the store account and adding more money, you know, throughout the time that they're here. Don't worry if they run out. Even if they lost their toothbrush, we would still make sure that, you know, all their needs were taken care of.
Got a couple more questions about mail and like sending packages and stuff like that. Like, of course, you can send like any amount of letters and care packages to your children. The big things to remember is when you drop your child off, you'll find out what cabin they are in, and it helps us a lot in the process, and the kid will get the package a little bit quicker if the cabin name is on it, just so that we know exactly what camp, exactly what cabin it's going to, because there are some instances where mail gets lost in between the camps because of like an improper label of like no cabin name or like only a first name, stuff like that. But yeah. A couple questions about do we spray or treat our camp for ticks and other things like that? Bruce, do you have more information on that? I'm blanking on the answer at the moment.
Typically we have not.
Yeah. We do like scan our property for like poison ivy, and if there's any big infiltrations of that, we do spray that area. And then also if there's any time that like the kids are walking through like a heavily like wooded area or like an area where there is a possible like volume of ticks, our counselors are well versed and like know very well that like after they're doing this activity, they have like all of the campers give themselves a little tick check, especially at night, just at the end of every day, just to double check, just like when they're taking a shower and stuff, just looking around and making sure that they don't have any ticks on them or on their body. And if they do, like the counselors know that they just go right to the nurse and we'll take it off. And then we'll also save it in case of something like Lyme disease. It doesn't happen that often, but just in case if symptoms of Lyme disease do develop, we do have the tick so that you can get that tested as well. But yeah, we have a question about the pickup time on July 2nd, which I believe is the end of session 1A.
Yeah,
I am blanking on the time.
Well, normally, I guess we'll table that one because much like check-in, we haven't quite determined if we're going to have a staggered checkout or how that's going to work. So we don't have the definitive time on that right now.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any? Oh, another question. And then yes, like kind of in the similar fashion, like 1B check-in is on July 4th. So obviously, like once we have a clear outline of what check-in and check-out will look like, it will look like the same for every session for the most part. We'll get that information out to you guys as fast as possible so that you can plan your schedule, especially around that busy traveling holiday. Yes, a question about what is the age of a junior or / senior camper. Please, Sarah or Bruce, please tell me if I'm wrong, but every session is a little bit different because we don't like take a set number of any age person. It's a rolling enrollment where we have like, we'll take as many 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds as is. We don't have like a set number. So I would say around the age of like 12 to 13, 11 to 13 is kind of like the split between juniors and senior campers.
Yeah, I think you're right on point with that in terms of it kind of varies from session to session. Some sessions are older, some sessions are younger, some sessions have a good mix of all ages, and that kind of what makes up the units.
Just
Got
got
a
a
question here about laundry. So laundry is not available for any campers that are attending for only 2 weeks. So something to keep in mind when you're packing, and I know especially with masks as well. So yeah, we don't do any laundry service during 1 or 2 week sessions.
We will be sending you out a packing list. And if your child's coming for 2 weeks, then the suggestion is enough clothes there for the 2 weeks. If it's more than 2 weeks, we do provide a laundry service. That said, if a child has an accident, we do have a washer and dryer on site. So if we need to wash someone's sleeping bag or something gets soiled, we just can't do laundry for the time. When we do laundry during changeover, we actually go to a local laundry. We don't have the ability to wash multiple loads of laundry here. So.
I just got a question about airports. If you're flying into the country, Boston Logan Airport's probably the best. I believe it's the only one that we will do airport pickups for if that is something that you need.
We would also do Providence.
Oh, we also do Providence.
But Boston is a more, especially if you're coming internationally, you'd be flying into Boston.
Yeah. Got a question about medicine, how it is handled. Whether it is like a prescribed medication by a doctor, or if it's something like you want your child to take Zyrtec or like Flintstones gummy, all of that is handled by our nurses and healthcare team. So a part of that check-in process, that is if you were to have any form of medication, whether it's a emergency EpiPen or anything like that, or just daily medication, you'll meet with the nursing team and we'll talk, and they'll walk you through the process of like, what time do you want this medication to be delivered, in what instances and stuff like that. But all the medicine will be handled by our healthcare team.
And the nurses are aware of the medication schedules. I think it's one of you or a couple of you wrote, well, my child has to take their medicine half an hour before breakfast. The nurses will know that. The counselor will know that. They'll make sure that they bring them to the health center a half an hour before breakfast to get their medication.
Question about a gluten-free diet. Any dietary restrictions or concerns, you can reach out to our head of dining services anytime, like next week. Her name's Lois. She's amazing. She's been here forever. There's nothing that she can't do when it comes to like providing for an allergy. She's seen it all. There's not much that catches her off guard. And then also on the same question, they asked if you could have food in the cabin. We do not allow food to be in the cabin just because we are outdoors. It does attract animals. It's not the greatest environment to keep food in. But also if you have, like, for instance, in this example, like gluten-free, if you have certain gluten-free food that your child really likes, you can bring that to camp and Lois can use that in her cooking. It's just a conversation that you have to have with her beforehand.
Yeah, another reason to encourage you to come to the open house dates, you'll be able to meet Lois. She can talk about, but when there are specific diets, and we have many, we have kids with celiac disease, we have kids with PKU, we keep additional food in. We've had campers that have their own kind of box of food in the fridge in the kitchen. So yeah, we can pretty much accommodate everything.
We have a question here in the chat about if my camper is not interested or will not participate in land sports or any specific activity that the cabin might be doing, how we manage that. You want to field that one?
Yeah, so speaking from experience as a camper, that sometimes I was pretty definite on not wanting to do certain activities. The counselors take heavy input from the campers on what they want to do. Like if there's a really active bunch in the cabin, like, and they want to playing a lot of sports, like that's completely fine. Like the counselors, basically a couple days out, will kind of plan what activities they're going to be doing for the next couple days. And they heavily take input from the campers of like what their interests are. Like they're not just going to be assigned arts and crafts because it's on the schedule. Like if nobody's interested in arts and crafts or some other activity, like the counselors most likely wouldn't schedule it that. And we totally understand that like not everybody from the same cabin is going to want to do the same things. So we do get a feel for where people are at when it comes to what activities they want to do. And the counselors do a very good job at appeasing to everybody's interests. And whether it's playing a sport game, but adding like a creative twist onto it, our staff has a no limit on the creativity that they've put on games and activities, and they really do tailor towards the kids. I think it's one of the best parts about this camp. And it's why I've always came back year after year, is that staff's creativity is amazing. So I wouldn't be too worried about a child not wanting to participate, because the counselors really do everything they can to get somebody involved into the activity that they're doing. And also, when it worst comes to worst, the activity will only last for like 45 minutes to an hour. So it's not the end of the world, and most likely they'll be super excited about the next one as well. Our first time buddy cabin requests always approved. So with cabin mate requests, the big thing with that is that it is mutual across both parties, so that like friend one is requesting friend two, and friend two is also requesting friend one. And it's like a one friend mutual request. Like as long as they're the same age, I would say 99 times out of 100, that won't be a problem at all.
I would say 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, 100 times out of 100. Like when I was a camper, I always requested a friend. I never had a single issue whenever I was a camper. No, I've never seen a single issue really like that ever happen, for the most part. The name of our dining services is Lois Adams. All of her name and her contact information is on our website. If you go, I believe it's like the camp section on the top left, and then there's a little tab that says like meet the directors. All the contact information is right there.
You can also send it to me or us, and we'll forward that to her. So
Yeah.
not a problem.
We have a question. Do you need doctor's orders for non-prescription medications that are taken daily? No, you do not. But anything that you bring to camp, anything, even over-the-counter medications, need to go to our health office. So the campers can't keep those in the cabin with them. But if there's anything that your camper takes daily, even if it's not prescription, you'll just give that to our nurses, explain to them again, what they take and when, and then the nurses will facilitate that.
Mm-hmm. We also got a question a little while ago, and I'm sorry that I'm just getting into it now. I wrote it down, but kind of slipped my mind. But it was in regards to plastic drawers and like packing like stuff like that for camp. The cabins are spacious, but they're not huge. So obviously, like there's enough room for everybody's belongings, and like a lot of people will slide their trunks or duffel bags, whatever they bring a lot of their luggage in, underneath the beds. I would say that for most cabins, there is a little bit of space for if you had like a small set of like 3 little drawers, like comparable to the size of like, I would say like a nightstand, like that shouldn't be a problem at all to put right next to the bed. But anything larger than, I would say like width wise, like 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet would be like a little bit too big for the cabin. And then also any questions like that, like please feel free to like email us again later as we get closer to the summer, or even like coming to the open house and asking then.
All right, we have a question. If you're not able to make the open house dates, so our open house dates are, 2 Sundays coming up in May, the 16th and the 23rd. If you're not able to make those dates and are still interested in talking to camp directors and seeing camps, please just call our office or email, depending on which program. If you're at Hayward, emailing, Sarah or, Sean for Burgess and myself for Adventure Trips, and we will absolutely do our best to try to find a time, set up a tour, and answer any questions that you might still have after the end of this.
Mm-hmm. We had another question about cabinet requests, like what if, and just in general, if like the cabinet request isn't mutual, or if you want to change it for any reason, or just check the status of it. I don't believe you're able to change it from your end on the website. But if you just reach out to us, just give us a quick phone call. It'll literally take us a minute to check, and we can change it right then and there if you want to change it for whatever reason. I believe we've answered all of the questions that have come in. Please feel free to keep sending them in. Like Bruce said, we can answer whatever comes to mind, but also if you want to come to our open house and ask us all the questions there, that is fine as well. But we can definitely stay on for a couple more minutes as questions come in.
All right, well, I think we'll leave it there. As Evan has said, just the fact that we're gonna get off doesn't mean the questions and answers have to end. You can call or email us at any time. Yeah, I'm assuming most of you still on the line are new to camp. And, I know, having been here a long time, I know how much trust it takes as a parent, having been a parent of 3 daughters, that how much trust it takes to send your child to a camp and complete strangers, and especially in this COVID time. So there's never any questions that we don't want to answer. And our success is predicated on trust and transparency. So don't hesitate to reach out. If you can't make it to the open house, as Rebecca said, reach out to us. We're happy to do a one-on-one tour if that really, there's a great ease if you're able to bring your kids to camp beforehand to actually see the camp, to see the cabins they might be in, to meet Sean and Sarah and Rebecca. So I encourage you to do this. So if you can't make the open house, so happy to make that work one-on-one. But unless there's anything else pressing, Sean, I think we'll say thank you and good night to everyone. And
yeah, I got just to reiterate about the open houses. So the open houses are on May 16th and May 23rd from noon to 4. Looking at my calendar, make sure that I got the exact dates and time right.
And go ahead, John.
And then everybody would just come to Camp Burgess. It's the main address on our website, 75 Stowe Road, Sandwich, Mass. And then from there, whether you're looking at adventure trips, Burgess or Hayward, we'll then send everybody on the way for the proper tours, all from our Burgess. Yeah.
And the noon to 4 is just the open house hours. You can come at any time between noon and 4. You don't have to schedule it so you're here for 4 hours. Typically, you'll show up. The most you might have to wait to do a tour is 10 or 15 minutes. We usually wait till we get a handful of people, 6 or 8, 10 people, and then we head out on a tour. So when you arrive at Burgess, that's where we'll be. Again, you might have to wait around. You can ask any questions you have, and then if you're here for Hayward, then we will drive over, you'll follow us, and we'll do the tour at Hayward. So, but you can come anytime between noon and 4.
Yep. And the address again is just 75 Stowe, Stowe Road, Sandwich, Mass. I'm putting it in the chat right now, and it's also on our website. Yeah, so please feel free, reach out anytime. Sorry, I didn't put it in the right chat. Sorry, computer speed. But yeah.
The packing lists are included in the parent guide. So that is on our website, if you are wondering about packing lists.
Now, we have not updated it for the masks, but everything else on that packing list is pertinent for the session that you're coming to.
Yep. Oh, am I? All right. But yeah, thank you all again for coming. We're super excited for you guys and your children to experience camp. And if we don't see you guys at the open house, we'll see you guys during the summer.
Thank you all very much. Much appreciate your time.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Good night.
Nice.
Bye.